When I was 1 month old, my parents moved to Southern California from Washington State. They moved essentially like 2 states worth, all the way down from Washington to California when I was just a month old. And you can imagine what it would be like to move your entire household from one college to another at that time with a 1 month old baby. It was a pretty crazy time for them, and I'm sure it was for me as well. My dad was in a very special dental class that was only 3 years long at Loma Linda. They tried a couple of years to have 3-year-long classes, and he was one of those. He graduated in 75B because they had 2 classes that graduated in 75. After a couple of years of trying, they decided to go back to the 4-year session. And so he was one of the only ones at that school that did the 3-year. He survived in the class very well and graduated on time. He was one of only very few in his class that actually did. So I was very proud of him as a dentist. He was excellent dentist, and he enjoyed dentistry so much. It was such an important part of his life. And I'm so glad that he had the opportunity to go to dental school. While he was there, he would roof houses on the side to make a little extra money. And my mother decided to stay home with me from the moment I was born. It was kind of like what she thought was the right thing to do. And as a woman, she would criticize any of the other women who would work, have children, and work at the same time. That if you had children, you should lay aside whatever your career is and just focus on your kids. So that was an interesting belief that she had. And she pretty much her entire life felt that her beliefs were the only right beliefs, that no other beliefs were correct. That affected all of my childhood and adulthood until she passed away recently. She always had a very strong feeling that her beliefs were the correct beliefs. And the first time that was demonstrated in her life was when I was born, and her belief was that she should stay home and take care of me. She stayed home, took care of the house, took care of me. She was very good at buying everything from the used. At that time, they had a lot of outdoor pavilions, and then I'm trying to think what they were called. Flea markets. They had a lot of outdoor flea markets, so she would buy all of our things from there, and from the grocery outlet type of stores where they had discounts on groceries. So she was very careful to keep the cost down, and that was very nice for my dad, since he was the one doing all of the providing, bringing in the money through working and other means. I learned later that my other part of my family, my grandma and my aunt, helped my dad financially some. He kind of implied that he didn't get help, but as I got to know them later in life, they began telling stories of the way that they had helped financially. I am so grateful for each one of their helps. In the thing that I wanted to talk about today is the concept of nature versus nurture. And when we look at our lives, we can see that some of the things come from our nature. For example, in my genetic, so I think of nature as my genetic background, my family background, the nature of my human body. That this human body is created by the genetic form and other things like that. The color of my eyes, the same as my family. If you look at my face, I have a similar to both the Fletchers and the Tattages. So I have like a similarity to both sides of my family. So there's all of that nature aspect. And when you look at twins, there are some things about the twins that are the same simply because of them being born with the same genetics. On the other hand, there's the nurture. There's the how you're raised. For example, I was raised by a mom who believes that her beliefs are the only right ones. And so that is part of my nurture. The love every single night. As my dad was studying, he would have me on his lap, and he would rock me on his lap, and as he would read and study. And he said that I would never sleep. That was probably part of my genetic code, was to not sleep as a baby. I would take a 45-minute nap in the middle of the day, and I'd wake up around 5 and go to bed around 10. That was my sleep schedule. It wasn't a sleep. So my dad would sit in the rocking chair, rock me on his lap, and read dental books. And as he would do that, you can imagine all the love that he was pouring into me, which is a part of my nurturing. And while he was pouring this love into me, every time he would start to fall asleep and stop rocking, I would start crying and wake him up. And so we would work together. I would help him study late into the night by keeping him up as a brand new infant. So that's our little story. So I think that has both the nature of me not having a sleep schedule and the nurture of his love and attention pouring into me. So I was thinking about how I moved all the way to California as a 1-month-old. I've never had a problem with moving. In fact, I enjoy it. I've never had a problem with completely transforming or changing where I'm located or how I'm living my life. I just recently changed my entire career. Those are not fears of mine. It's not a problem of mine. I wasn't homesick. I went to college at 17. I wasn't homesick. I went over to Ireland for a year. I wasn't homesick. I had that independence, and I think some of it comes from that nurture of the way I was raised, that I moved so early in life. And then I moved, and 3 years later, I moved again back up to Washington. So then there were other times. Every 2 years, I went to a different school, even though I lived in the same town. I really had that ability and desire for movement and change. I could talk about even still today. I went to the Unitarian Church for a year. Then I was part of the Buddhist community for about a year. And I was a pagan for a year. I just learn and grow and change. And that is a huge part of my life. I think it's also a nature thing. When I look at my family went from being really strong Catholics to Seventh-day Adventists just through some good coming to the door, knocking on the door, and presenting the information to them. They had to leave their entire family. They had to completely change. They changed how they ate. They changed how they lived. They became vegetarian. They no longer drank. And my grandpa and grandma, my grandpa became a colporteur. So he started doing that for his job, what he called spreading good news. And they completely had to go away from their family and become completely new people because of their beliefs. And there are many examples and times when my family, another one is my great-grandpa was a child in Croatia, and he got on a boat at 12 years old. He stowed away in a boat and came over to the U.S. and went all the way across the country. I don't know if he was seeking his fortune or why he came, but I know that he came all the way over, and my great-grandpa ended up in Alaska at 19 during the gold rush. So he came all the way from the East Coast to the West Coast. And then he ended up in Montana as a wheat farmer. So when you look at my nature, the way that the things that are in my DNA doesn't have homesickness. It doesn't have whatever the opposite of independence is. I'm a very independent person from nature and nurture. So what I wanted to talk about today was the next part of my story. At 1 month old, my parents and I moved I'm glad that my parents were with me. I was only a month old. Anyway, that we moved all the way down from Washington State to California, and my dad started school. And during those 3 years I lived down there, and he helped me. And I helped him study every day for dentistry. And I'm sure that had an influence on my life as well. I ended up spending 12 years in higher education after high school. Anyway, I will talk more about my experiences in California in the next video. So, do you feel that nature is more significant than nurture, or nurture is more significant than nature? Do you think they both are about the same? I'm of the philosophy where rather than one or the other, it's both. And looking at things from more of a both perspective. So we'll talk about all of that more later. Thank you for joining me today.